Picture this. A man in his early 40s walks into his doctor's office feeling fine. He's not overweight. He exercises a few times a week. He watches what he eats, more or less. By every outward measure, he looks healthy. Then his scan results come back and his doctor goes quiet. His liver is packed with fat. His arteries are already calcifying. His inflammatory markers are through the roof. He stares at the screen and says the same thing I've heard hundreds of times in my career. But I'm not even fat. And that right there is the problem. Because the fat that's destroying him isn't the kind you can see. It's not sitting under his skin. It's not hanging over his belt. It's buried deep inside his body, wrapped around his liver, his pancreas, his intestines, and even his heart. It's called visceral fat, and it is arguably the most dangerous substance your body produces. The terrifying part is that millions of people are walking around right now carrying lethal amounts of it and have absolutely no idea. They look fine on the outside while their organs are slowly suffocating on the inside. What makes visceral fat so different from the fat you can pinch? Everything. And what happens when it finally starts to break down might be the most important health transformation most people never talk about. So let's get into it. Most people think of body fat as one thing: extra padding, stored calories, something that jiggles when you move too fast. But that's only part of the story, and frankly, it's the least dangerous part. The fat you can see in the mirror, the stuff sitting just beneath your skin, is called subcutaneous fat. It's not ideal in large amounts, but biologically speaking, it's relatively harmless. It mostly sits there, insulates you, cushions your joints, and minds its own business. Visceral fat is a completely different animal. It doesn't sit under the skin. It nestles itself deep inside your abdominal cavity, wrapping directly around your vital organs. Your liver gets coated in it. Your pancreas gets smothered by it. Your intestines become tangled in it. And in severe cases, it even infiltrates the tissue surrounding your heart. You can't feel it. You can't grab it. Most of the time, you can't even see it unless a scan reveals it. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. It hides. But here's what really separates visceral fat from every other type of fat in your body. Visceral fat is not just storage. It is biologically active. Think of it less like a warehouse and more like a factory. A factory that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pumping out chemical signals that wreak havoc on your entire system. It releases inflammatory molecules like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These aren't minor irritants. These are the same chemicals involved in autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular events, and tumor growth. Visceral fat also drives insulin resistance, which means your cells stop responding properly to insulin. Your blood sugar climbs. Your pancreas works overtime, and the whole metabolic machine starts grinding toward breakdown. On top of that, visceral fat disrupts leptin, the hormone that tells your brain you're full, so your brain never gets the signal to stop eating. You feel hungry, even when your body has more than enough stored energy, and it pushes cortisol higher, locking your body into a chronic stress state that makes it nearly impossible to lose weight, especially around the midsection. This is why visceral fat is tightly connected to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, dementia, and even certain cancers. It doesn't just correlate with these conditions, it actively fuels them. Chronic low-grade inflammation is the soil in which nearly every modern disease takes root, and visceral fat is one of the most aggressive sources of that inflammation. But what happens when this factory finally shuts down? Here's something that will frustrate you if you've been trying to lose belly fat for years. The standard advice doesn't work, not for visceral fat. You've heard it 1,000 times. Eat less, move more, create a calorie deficit, burn more than you consume. And on paper, that sounds logical. But visceral fat doesn't care about your calorie spreadsheet. It doesn't respond to math. It responds to hormones. Think about how many people you know, maybe even yourself, who have dieted hard, cut portions, counted every calorie, hit the gym 5 days a week, and the scale moved, the number went down, clothes got a little looser, but the belly stayed, the bloating remained. And when blood tests came back, the doctor still flagged elevated triglycerides, high fasting glucose, or markers of liver inflammation. That's because the fat they lost was mostly subcutaneous. The visceral fat, the stuff actually threatening their organs, barely budged. And worse, in many cases, aggressive calorie restriction actually made things harder. When you suddenly slash calories without addressing the underlying hormonal chaos, your body doesn't interpret that as a wellness plan. It interprets it as a threat. Cortisol spikes, metabolism slows, muscle tissue gets broken down for energy before visceral fat does. And the visceral fat, which the body considers a critical energy reserve protecting vital organs, gets locked down even tighter. This is the cruel irony of crash dieting. The harder you push, the more your body resists. You end up thinner on the outside, but metabolically worse on the inside. I've seen patients who lost 30, 40, even 50 pounds on aggressive programs and still had fatty liver, still had insulin resistance, still had elevated inflammatory markers. They thought they were winning, but biologically, they were running in circles. The missing piece was never willpower. It was never discipline. It was understanding that visceral fat has a gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper is insulin. Insulin is one of the most powerful hormones in your body, and when it comes to visceral fat, it runs the show. Insulin's primary job is storage. When you eat, insulin rises to shuttle glucose into cells and store excess energy. That's normal, that's healthy. The problem begins when insulin stays elevated all the time. Modern life practically guarantees chronically high insulin. We eat constantly. Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, late night snack. Many people are eating from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep. Every time food enters the body, insulin spikes. And as long as insulin remains elevated, fat stays locked in storage, especially visceral fat. Imagine visceral fat as a high-security vault buried deep inside a bank. The vault has multiple locks. The combination to open it is a sustained, meaningful drop in insulin. Not a tiny dip between meals. A real prolonged period where insulin falls low enough for the body to switch gears from storage mode to access mode. This is exactly where fasting enters the picture, and I don't mean starving yourself, I mean creating deliberate windows of time where no food comes in. When you extend your overnight fast, skip the late-night snacking, or consolidate your meals into a shorter window, insulin finally gets the chance to drop to baseline. That drop is the signal. That's the password. Once insulin falls far enough, the vault cracks open. Free fatty acids begin pouring out of visceral fat stores and flooding into the bloodstream. But these fats aren't just floating around randomly. They get routed directly to the organ that needs relief the most, the liver. The liver starts converting those fatty acids into ketone bodies, and this is where the magic really begins. Ketones are not some trendy diet buzzword. They are a deeply ancient fuel source. Your body has been producing them for hundreds of thousands of years. Ketones burn cleaner than glucose. They produce less oxidative stress. They calm inflammation at a cellular level. And they provide incredibly stable energy to the brain and heart, two organs that are heavily impacted by visceral fat. As ketone production ramps up, inflammatory signals start to quiet down. Interleukin-6 drops. Tumor necrosis factor, alpha, decreases. And here's the remarkable thing I've seen in my practice. Blood tests start improving before people lose noticeable weight. The inflammation cools before the mirror changes. The biology shifts before the appearance does. This is the first wave of the transformation, and most people don't even realize it's happening. Once visceral fat starts releasing its grip, the ripple effects move through your body like a city being rebuilt after years of neglect. And it starts with the organ that was under the most pressure, the liver. The liver is your body's metabolic command center. It processes nutrients, filters toxins, manages cholesterol, regulates blood sugar, and produces bile. When visceral fat surrounds it, the liver gets overwhelmed. Fat infiltrates the liver tissue itself, creating what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This condition is staggeringly common. Some estimates suggest nearly a third of adults have some degree of it, and most don't know. When visceral fat begins to break down, the liver finally gets breathing room. It starts exporting stored fat instead of hoarding it. Triglyceride levels in the blood begin to fall. Hepatic insulin sensitivity improves, meaning the liver stops dumping excess glucose into the bloodstream. The small, dense LDL particles that are most strongly linked to heart attacks start declining. Not because cholesterol was specifically targeted, but because the inflammatory source driving their production was removed. As the liver recovers, the gut follows. This connection is critical and wildly underappreciated. Visceral fat fuels inflammation in the intestinal lining. That inflammation weakens the barrier between your gut and your bloodstream. Tiny gaps open between intestinal cells, allowing bacterial toxins called lipopolysaccharides to leak through. This is sometimes called metabolic endotoxemia, and it silently drives insulin resistance, immune activation, and chronic disease throughout the entire body. When visceral fat shrinks, that inflammatory pressure on the gut eases. The intestinal lining begins to heal. Tight junctions between cells strengthen. Fewer toxins escape into circulation. The immune system, which stations roughly 70% of its forces in and around the gut, starts calming down. It shifts from a state of constant low-grade alarm to a regulated, purposeful defense. The consequences are far-reaching. Autoimmune flare-ups often soften. Joint pain improves. Skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis begin clearing up. These aren't separate problems being fixed independently. They are downstream effects of eliminating a central source of inflammation. At the same time, the gut microbiome starts shifting. A healthier metabolic environment favors beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate is extraordinary. It nourishes the gut lining from the inside, reduces inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, and even supports healthy brain function. As beneficial bacteria flourish and harmful strains retreat, the gut transforms from a war zone into a functioning ecosystem, and the immune system follows suit. With less inflammatory stimulation coming from visceral fat and a stronger gut barrier blocking endotoxin leakage, immune cells shift from attack mode to repair mode. Chronic inflammation becomes targeted, purposeful inflammation. The body stops fighting phantom threats and starts healing real damage. But the changes don't stop at the gut. What happens next in the brain might be the most surprising part of all. If you've ever felt mentally sluggish, unable to concentrate, weirdly anxious for no clear reason, or stuck in a low mood that nothing seems to shake, visceral fat might be playing a much bigger role than you think. Visceral fat communicates with the brain constantly. It sends signals through inflammatory molecules, through hormones like leptin and cortisol, and through the vagus nerve, which acts like a direct phone line between your gut and your brain. When visceral fat is elevated, the brain is under constant bombardment. Inflammatory cytokines cross the blood-brain barrier and trigger neuroinflammation. Cortisol remains chronically high, disrupting memory, focus, and emotional regulation. Leptin resistance means the brain can't accurately assess the body's energy status, creating a persistent sense of unease and hunger that has nothing to do with actual caloric need. When visceral fat starts to decline, those signals begin to quiet. Neuroinflammation eases. Cortisol starts falling back into normal patterns, and something remarkable happens with fuel delivery. As the body shifts toward fat burning and ketone production, the brain gains access to a fuel source that is cleaner and more stable than glucose. Ketones don't cause the spikes and crashes that come with sugar-dependent energy. They provide steady, efficient power. At the same time, a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, starts increasing. BDNF is essentially fertilizer for your neurons. It supports the growth of new brain cells, strengthens connections between existing ones, and improves plasticity, which is your brain's ability to adapt, learn, and recover. People going through this phase often describe it in strikingly similar terms. They say their thinking feels sharper. They notice a calm focus they haven't experienced in years. Anxiety softens, mood stabilizes, sleep deepens and becomes more restorative. These aren't vague feelings or placebo effects. They're the result of measurable biological changes. The brain is finally operating in an environment that supports clarity instead of chaos. Meanwhile, at the cellular level, mitochondria begin to recover. Mitochondria are the tiny power plants inside every cell, responsible for producing the energy your body runs on. Chronic inflammation damages mitochondria and reduces something called metabolic flexibility, which is your body's ability to switch smoothly between burning glucose and burning fat. When inflammation falls and ketone availability rises, mitochondria become more efficient. Energy production improves across the board. The body regains its ability to function like a hybrid engine, seamlessly toggling between fuel sources depending on what's available. This is a massive shift, and it explains why so many people say they feel like a completely different person once visceral fat starts clearing. They're not imagining it. Their cells are literally producing energy differently. So if visceral fat doesn't respond to brute force, what does it respond to? Rhythm, consistency, safety. Think of your body as a government that makes decisions based on the signals it receives. When those signals are chaotic, erratic eating schedules, poor sleep, chronic stress, constant processed food, the government goes into emergency mode. Resources get hoarded, fat gets stored around vital organs as an emergency buffer. Visceral fat isn't a malfunction, it's a survival strategy. The moment you introduce rhythm and consistency, the entire calculation changes. Start with eating windows. When you create a consistent daily pattern where meals happen within a defined window and fasting extends through the night and into the morning, insulin begins falling predictably, not dramatically at first, but steadily. Over days and weeks, the body learns that it doesn't need to keep glucose constantly circulating. It can safely access stored fat. And visceral fat, because it's metabolically active and easily accessible, is often the first reserve the body taps into. Sleep is the next pillar, and it's more powerful than most people realize. When you sleep poorly, cortisol stays elevated through the night and into the morning. Cortisol tells visceral fat to hold its position. It also suppresses growth hormone, which normally pulses during deep sleep. Growth hormone is one of the most potent visceral fat mobilizing signals your body produces. When sleep is fragmented, shallow, or too short, that growth hormone pulse gets blunted. Visceral fat stays put. But when you start sleeping deeply, consistently, and in alignment with your body's natural circadian rhythm, cortisol drops appropriately at night. Melatonin rises on schedule. Growth hormone surges during the deep phases, and visceral fat finally receives the signal that it's safe to let go. This is why people who prioritize sleep often notice their belly shrinking before they've changed anything else about their diet or exercise routine. Stress management deserves its own spotlight here. Psychological and emotional stress directly increase gut permeability, raise inflammatory cytokines, and drive visceral fat accumulation. The vagus nerve, that communication highway between the brain and the gut, transmits danger signals non-stop when you're under chronic stress. Everything downstream responds accordingly. Inflammation rises. Gut bacteria shift toward less favorable species. Insulin resistance worsens. Visceral fat expands. When you begin managing stress through breathwork, time outdoors, meaningful social connection, or even simple daily walks, the vagus nerve shifts into a parasympathetic state. That's the rest and repair mode. The body receives the message that the emergency is over. Visceral fat listens. Food quality matters enormously, but not in the way most people have been taught. Visceral fat is far less concerned with how many calories you eat and far more concerned with the signals those calories send. Ultra-processed foods generate inflammation, disrupt gut bacteria, spike insulin, and tell the body that the environment is unstable. Whole, unprocessed foods do the opposite. Fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria and improves intestinal integrity. Healthy fats support hormone production. Protein preserves muscle mass during fat loss. Micronutrients reduce oxidative stress. The gut and liver aren't counting your calories. They're reading the chemical messages your food delivers. This is why someone eating real whole food in a consistent pattern often loses more visceral fat than someone eating processed diet food at a calorie deficit. As this rhythm takes hold, the hormonal landscape transforms. Leptin sensitivity returns, which means your brain finally hears the fullness signal again. Hunger becomes appropriate instead of constant. Cravings loosen their grip. You stop obsessing about food because your biology is no longer screaming for it. Adiponectin, a hormone that enhances insulin sensitivity and promotes fat burning, begins rising. It's one of the quiet heroes of metabolic health, and it only flourishes when visceral fat is in retreat. The beautiful thing about all of this is that it doesn't feel like punishment. When your biology is aligned, effort decreases, energy increases, motivation returns naturally, not through gritted teeth and willpower, but through hormonal harmony. This is the difference between fighting your body and working with it. Here's what I need you to walk away understanding, because if you get this, everything else clicks into place. Visceral fat is not your enemy. It is not a sign of failure. It is not evidence of laziness or lack of discipline. Visceral fat is a response. It is your body's adaptation to years of signals that told it the internal environment was hostile, unpredictable, and inflammatory. When I look at someone carrying a large amount of visceral fat, I don't see a person who ate too much. I see a nervous system that has been on high alert for too long, a liver that's been overwhelmed with more than it can process, a gut that's been leaking inflammatory compounds into the bloodstream for years, and a hormonal system that has been forced into survival mode, doing exactly what evolution designed it to do: protect vital organs at all costs. Visceral fat is the body's emergency shield. It forms in response to metabolic chaos, and it will not leave until the chaos resolves. This is the fundamental reason why punishing yourself doesn't work. Extreme restriction, brutal exercise programs, sleep deprivation from overwork, constant stress about your appearance, all of these send the exact same signal to your body. Danger is still here. Hold on to the reserves. What actually unlocks visceral fat loss is the opposite. Consistent nourishment, not starvation. Restorative sleep, not late-night hustling. Calm movement that improves insulin sensitivity, not exhausting workouts that spike cortisol. Stress reduction that tells the nervous system the emergency is over. When these signals align, something profound happens. The body begins to trust that the environment is safe. Insulin falls and stays low. Cortisol normalizes. Adiponectin rises. Leptin starts working again. Inflammatory markers drop. And visceral fat, that emergency buffer the body has been clinging to for years, begins to dissolve. Quietly, steadily, permanently. The liver unloads its stored fat and regains metabolic flexibility. The gut seals its lining and stops leaking toxins. Mitochondria across every organ become more efficient. The brain clears its fog. The immune system stands down from its chronic state of alert. These changes happen before dramatic weight loss shows up on the scale. They happen before your reflection looks different. And that's the part nobody tells you. The most important transformation is invisible. It's happening in your bloodstream, in your liver cells, in the lining of your gut, in the mitochondria of your muscles, and in the neural pathways of your brain, long before it shows up in a photograph. So stop chasing the number on the scale. Stop punishing your body into submission. Instead, restore the rhythm. Restore the safety. Restore the nourishment. Give your biology the conditions it needs, and it will do what it has always known how to do. Your body has been waiting for permission to heal. The only question left is whether you're ready to give it.